Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on strategic partnerships. I'm going to move into this. You can see this. I'm Nicole Foerschler Horn, President of JMH Consulting. And Lynn, I will let you introduce yourself.
I'm Lynn Wietecha. I'm the Director of E-Learning Services here at Lawrence Technological University in Michigan.
And now we're going to shut off the cameras so you can just see the PowerPoint and dive into things. But thanks everyone for joining us today. This has been a topic that we wanted to get into because I've had a lot of both clients and friends in higher education who are exploring partnerships, and I've heard both success stories and horror stories. And of course, because we are partners to many, many universities in the United States and Canada, I have my own opinions on what works and what doesn't. I asked Lynn to join us today because she's had experience with a couple of different partners now. So let's dive into what our agenda will be today. Lynn, before we get started, why don't you give a little bit of background on Lawrence Tech?
Sure. Lawrence Tech is a small private university located in southeastern Michigan. We're about a half an hour north of Detroit. We are a private school, and our president and our board would describe us as more of an elite private school. We have 4 colleges: a College of Management that offers online MBAs and an online MSIT degree. We have a College of Engineering that offers 4 online degrees, graduate level online degrees, and we're probably most famous for our College of Architecture and Design, and our Masters of Architecture is online along with some other architecture programs. We also have a College of Arts and Science, which primarily supports offering service courses to our bachelor degree programs, but we do have some specialized arts and science degrees that are migrating into online.
Great, thank you. So for those of you who don't know, I'll give a quick also introduction about JMH Consulting. JMH Consulting is a higher education consulting firm that is worked in the higher education space since 2002, and we do one of 3 things. We help with marketing for non-traditional students, and that's both degree and non-credit programs. We help launch non-credit certificate programs that are more of your high-end certificate programs. And we also serve as an enrollment management partner where we are doing the marketing, recruiting, and retention for degree programs. And that's how I've come to know Lynn and Lawrence Tech. So today we're going to talk about why partner and some of the challenges that universities and colleges are facing and why they're choosing to partner. We're also going to go through different types of vendors in the marketplace and 5 critical questions to ask, and end with when things go wrong. I'd like to think that things never go wrong, but they do go wrong, so talk about that for a little while. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions, so you've got, if you look at your monitor, you'll be able to see a place where you can ask questions, so just go ahead and ask questions. And for those of you who, if you have to leave early or if you're multitasking and are afraid that you missed something very important, we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending it out to everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. So beginning with why partner. I'm not telling anyone on this webinar anything that you don't know already. Higher education has seen shrinking budgets for what seems to be the last decade. Public and state-supported schools are seeing fewer and fewer dollars being allocated to their budgets, and so they're having to raise tuition rates, which also causes challenges in and of itself. We also are seeing more competition in the space. And that's in terms of both more for-profit schools getting in and offering accredited and sometimes non-accredited programs, as well as your schools from across the country offering online programs that are suddenly in your market and competing for your students. And then there's also fewer traditional students in the marketplace that we're all competing for. The result is I'm hearing more conversations about every dollar being accounted for and needing to be justified. And now it's becoming more and more difficult to hire people, and we have fewer people doing more jobs, and just a bottom line of there's not enough money to get the job done.
Yeah, I would agree, Nicole. We certainly fall into that scenario here at Lawrence Tech. One of the other things that became an issue for us is we just, my department, the e-learning program, was created with the mandate to grow online programs. So the people in my office, we are instructional designers, developers, technologists, and we work with the faculty to migrate those courses from a traditional campus delivery format to an online format. We specialized in quality online design and delivery with organizations like Quality Matters and OLC. So when we were also asked, well, how can you grow the online programs and reach some of those non-traditional students, we really didn't have the people to do that. We do have a marketing department here, and they worked with us to a large extent to try and reach students beyond southeastern Michigan, but it was a bigger challenge than we were really able to address. We just didn't have the people or the time to expand to meet that need. So for us, partnering made sense. It was a good decision for us. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lynn.
No, I was just also going to say our marketing department here at Lawrence Tech does a great job, but their frame of reference has always been on reaching students who are either going to come here and live on campus and take classes, or who are already in the area and would be driving in to take classes. So to market our programs to Texas, to market our programs to California, to Wyoming, they weren't familiar with those markets and didn't necessarily have the ability to bring on resources for people who did. So we had to look creatively to bring in that expertise. So while we may have had people, they just didn't have the skill set that we needed to meet the new challenge.
And Lynn, you didn't have this challenge, but I do talk with other universities who they've got inexperience taking programs from a campus program into an online format and are looking for a partner in that way. And you spoke to the being able to reach from a marketing perspective your regional area. I think there's also a challenge in reaching adult non-traditional students and marketing to those students and recruiting for those students. It's different than what you do for your traditional undergrad students, and that adds to that expertise shortage.
Absolutely, and especially when you start to consider that we wanted to market specific degree programs. So you market a Master's of Architecture differently than you market a Master's of Business Administration. And our marketing department needed more resources, didn't have the resources to partner with the colleges to craft those marketing campaigns to specific degree program needs.
Which I think gets us right into the choosing the right partner. And Lynn, you've gone through this a couple of times now, both now with us, but previously with another partner. And what I heard when you and I first began talking was an internal dialogue that was happening around how to choose the right partner.
Right. We had partnered with another organization to help us grow our online enrollment, and we had worked with them for about 5 years, and it didn't necessarily go according to our expectations, but it was a learning experience. So we came out of that a little wiser, and we felt that we were a little in a better position to choose to enter into another relationship with another marketing and enrollment management partner and be far more informed in that process. So we looked for a couple of things. One was because we simply didn't have the budget to invest in the type of marketing that was needed to grow our enrollment programs. We needed a partner that really truly was a partner in every sense of that word, that they were willing to invest resources upfront to buy ads, to develop marketing campaigns, place those ads to help get things started. So we needed to have a partner that was comfortable with what we could deliver as far as a quality product and was willing to partner with us and make that initial investment. We also needed a partner that shared our goals, that we were able to sit down and articulate where we wanted to be in the short term, 4, 6, 9 months from the start of the partnership, as well as in the long term, 3, 4, 5 years out, and that we needed a partner that understood that while we wanted growth, we didn't want to explode overnight. We needed time to scale up. So we needed to have that shared understanding of not only how much we wanted to grow, but how quickly we wanted to grow. We also wanted a partner that would understand that there were some things that we were going to do on our own and keep in-house, and that would respect those decisions and work with us. We wanted a partner that had a record of success. We needed someone who could provide resources and references, and we could contact those organizations, those universities, and actually benchmark where were they when they started with JMH and where they were after a couple of years with JMH. So we were actually able to verify that there was data of success of the partner before we made that decision. But Nicole, I've also shared with you that a lot of what really made the difference for us when we went through this process and chose a second partnership was the organization the right fit for Lawrence Tech, both culturally, personality-wise. We put out an RFP. We still accepted proposals. We narrowed those proposals. We brought the top candidates in to give presentations, and we're human organizations, so these organizations have vibes and cultures and approaches, and we needed to find a partner that fit with our approach. We are not a hard sell institution. We welcome students. We want them to want to come to Lawrence Tech. We do not want a partner that's going to be really aggressive in contacting students and kind of strong-arming them into pursuing a degree. Those aren't the kind of students that are going to fit well here at Lawrence Tech. So that rightness of fit was a big thing for us.
Well, that is a nice, works nicely into the different types of partners that you can find that are in the higher education space now. The one that I hear probably the most about is a black box type partner, and that's where there's limited school input, where the vendor is saying, partner with me, I will handle all of it, and the only information that the university or college receives is the number of applicants that are currently in the process and accepted students. And so you're not going to hear about how much money is being spent on the marketing, the kind of success they're having on different marketing platforms, the number of leads they're getting, the cost per conversion, and also the type of ads or potentially the kind of emails that are running. And the way that a vendor justifies this is they're protecting the secret sauce. Now, clearly, from the way that I'm articulating this, I have an opinion about whether or not this is valuable. But I'll say on the positive side, if you as a university don't want to touch it, if you're like, I don't want to know what's going on, I just want to know the results, just tell me the end game, this might be a partnership that makes sense for you. If you just want to do a plug and play and don't need to know beyond that, you can do this. The downside, though, of this approach is with a black box partnership, you don't own any of the marketing once the partnership is complete, and you probably will not own any of the leads who have not converted into applicants. All of that stays in the box of the vendor, and that's a choice that you can make. Another type of partner that I'm seeing quite often now is software companies who are expanding into the service industry. And what they're leading with is, I am using my technology to help further enrollments, to help further marketing, to differentiate. They're leading with, you can use my technology and it will have a big impact. And we've talked with clients who have had mixed results on this kind of approach. Again, the challenge with this type of partnership is you're wrapping around your approach to enrollment management or online programs such that they fit within the technology that the company is bringing. The flip side of that is if you need a technology boost and there's alignment with the technology being offered, you can get quite a bit from this. So that's also a kind of partner. Another one that, this is where I'd place JMH Consulting, is you have an internal consultant type of partnership. And this type of partnership is more dependent upon the university input. So we, as an internal consultant, want to know, what do you, the university, believe is the audience for this program? Let's talk about the kind of people who come in. We would be asking you questions, helping to pull information. We would be sharing the way in which we're marketing to get feedback and input. For an internal consultant type of position, you're bringing in someone who has deep expertise in a given area. So they're going to share best practices and how they believe things should be launched and run, but they're doing it within the context of your university, your brand, and your infrastructure. And for us in particular, our goal as an internal consultant is to increase your intellectual capital, to make sure when you at the end of the contract, you're smarter about marketing, you're smarter about the admissions process, and you have increased marketing and recruitment capital that you can tap into. And the last kind of partner I will talk about is a transactional partner. And this is where a university or college, they're paying for a service and not results. And we certainly do this when we have marketing engagements for universities, and it's a fee-for-service marketing engagement. There's less investment by the vendor because you're paying for the service. And what the vendor is concerned about is ensuring that there's ongoing engagement with you, the university or college. And it's their brand that they're trying to protect. The flip side of that, though, is that if it doesn't go well, there's nothing other than a brand hit for the vendor. They're not losing any money. The results do, though, belong to you, the university or college, if it's a fee-for-service marketing engagement. And in some cases, if it's a recruitment engagement, you're buying kind of what the infrastructure is that is being set up. So those are the different kinds of partnerships that you can engage in. So Lynn, you kind of covered what the most important questions are that we talked about this as we were putting together this webinar that you asked as an institution.
Yeah, because we had already kind of been down this path once before and were greatly sensitive to the lessons that we learned from that. When we started down the path a second time, we put together a committee. The committee comprised of faculty who teach in our online programs and the leadership involved in the departments in those programs, our university level leadership. We had people from marketing, we had people from our finance department, and we got together and we basically said these are the things that we need to ask each of the vendors to respond to. And one of those was how are we going to articulate and measure the success of this partnership? How are we going to know that we've accomplished that goal, that the university is happy, but not just the university is happy in terms of increased revenue or increased enrollments, but our departments, are our faculty happy with the quality of candidates that our new partner has recruited for us? So there were a lot of factors that went into how we defined success, but we needed to articulate that ourselves before we then brought in the vendors. We asked the vendors as they prepared to come and talk with us to articulate what data they would provide to us throughout the process, both both in the contract negotiation process as well as the initial implementation, and then as well as how things are evolving over time. We wanted the partner to be very specific in their marketing strategy. What ads they were going to purchase, did they have some idea about where those ads were going to be placed, how they would work with our faculty and our department's expertise to make sure that those ads were indeed targeted and effective. Those were some very important things that we needed for the vendor to provide to us. Also, not only how the partner was going to manage that whole identifying a student from lead to enrollment, or to application to enrollment, that whole process, but how they were going to work with us, because it was a true partnership. They needed access to our systems. We needed data from them. We needed to have the partner articulate their ideal view for how they wanted that to work, and then we needed to go back to our offices and make sure that that was appropriate, that we had everything in place before we executed a contract. And then, because we were coming out of a contract, we wanted to have the conversation about what do we do when the contract ends? Who owns what files get handed over to us? We needed all of that very clearly articulated and written in the contract, so to try and remove as much ambiguity as we possibly could. So we asked vendors to identify how they were going to generate those leads, what they were going to do with those leads, how they were going to track and encourage students to move from leads to actual applicants. How were we as an institution going to get information on the status of those leads, where they were in that whole pipeline funnel, when they were enrolled, how they were enrolling, who was following up on those enrollments? Was it the partner? Was it our enrollment services department? We needed to have conversation with the vendor on what we determined is successful targeted program growth. Again, we want to grow our programs, we want to bring in new students, but we needed time to scale. So having conversation with the vendors about not only what is realistic, but also what might be too much, was a conversation that we really had with the vendors when we were going through this process. And also the other thing that came up with Lawrence Tech was what is a way to regionally increase the LTU brand and reach students who might not be familiar with that LTU brand. So our brand is rated high. There's great value in the LTU brand here in southeastern Michigan and in some of the surrounding states, Illinois, Indiana, Canada. But outside of that region, we're not all that well known. So part of the marketing campaign also had to include getting people familiar with who is this Lawrence Tech place that I'm hearing about all of a sudden. We had to have the conversation about retention and who was going to do what role. We didn't necessarily, we want to retain students, we wanted to have a high retention rate, but we needed to articulate with our partner when we wanted them to reach out to these students, when we wanted to reach out to those students, when we wanted to leverage our faculty. Our faculty have great relationships with our students, and sometimes they're the best people to make that touch point with the student to try and retain that student. And finally, for my university level administration, they wanted to see an increase in growth that translated to an increase in revenue. So the partners had to do projections for us that were based on their preliminary data so that we had a realistic expectation of what that increased revenue would be.
And Lynn, I was going to say on the percent of program growth and on the increased revenue, it's also worth asking partners about more recent successes in the last few years. You pull successes back from 5 or 7 years ago, it doesn't sound like it was that long ago, but the number of online competitors has dramatically increased in that amount of time. So that would be something that I would encourage people as they're talking about expected growth and measurement of success, and vendors are pointing to 5, 7, 10-year-old success stories, to make sure to ask for more recent examples.
And because of our previous relationship, we asked a great deal of questions regarding what I would call transparency. Our first partnership was more of the black box approach that you had referenced earlier. We didn't get information on how much money was being spent to place ads to promote the programs. We got information about leads, but things weren't always as clear as where those leads were coming from, how effective the marketing ads were in generating those leads, how long those leads were staying in the pipeline until they were either dropped or had led to an application. We didn't get any of that information. So when we were doing this a second time, we really wanted that transparency. We wanted regular reports from a partner so that we knew exactly what our partner was doing on our behalf.
Well, I'll dive into the marketing because we talked about that as one of the questions that university and colleges should be asking their potential vendors is, how are you going to market this program? And marketing needs to include both the traditional marketing of going and shaking hands and going to fairs and conferences, as well as the online marketing. What you're looking at here is some of the marketing that we're doing for James Madison's Master's in Information Security. And that marketing needs to align with the university's brand. There needs to be alignment in how the marketing talks about the program and how the university talks about itself. A successful marketing plan and a successful enrollment plan will be a holistic one, will be almost like an ecosystem, because those of us who work in higher education with non-traditional adult students know it's not a step 1, step 2, step 3, and they enroll kind of enrollment funnel. It's more of a Candyland kind of experience where you can have people who jump way towards the end of the board and then go back to the beginning of the board. So you need to make sure the marketing that you're putting in place is will reach them and talk with them no matter where they are at. So it's going to include the online marketing, it's going to include retargeting, it's going to include regular emails, and potentially things like on-demand information sessions or in-person conferences. I also like to talk about new techniques that are used. You know, anybody can talk about doing Google AdWords or retargeting, but that is just a piece of that holistic puzzle. Right now, marketing in particular is changing at an insanely fast pace, mostly because people don't have there's a lot more. You've got Facebook, of course, but as some of the 18-year-olds are getting older, soon we're going to need to be talking about Snapchat as an example. So what you're looking at here are some of the techniques we use, which include Twitter and Facebook, but we're also using Gmail ads. We also use exit intent pop-ups, which is what just popped up right here, which is before someone leaves, a pop-up will appear to try and give them a last offer. But I think it's important that no matter what kind of marketing is being done, that the university has a voice in how that program is being positioned. Do you have, and you should be asking things like, do you have an opportunity to weigh in? Do you get to see the email communication plans prior to going out? Do you get to see samples of the ad that are representative of the way in which the program is going to be discussed? This matters because it impacts your brand. It impacts the kind of people that you're going to be bringing in. And also, and this isn't always done purposefully, but sometimes promises are made because vendors assume that something is true that may not be true. And that's where you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to have a voice in this. Lynn, did you want to have anything to add to that point?
Oh, this was huge for us. It goes back to that comment I made about it being the right fit. Our marketing department, our vice president of marketing and his team were in the meetings where we brought in the vendors to give presentations because they have spent years developing the LTU brand and the look and feel of our existing ad campaign, and they did not want to have a second ad campaign that contradicted that. So they were very concerned about a new partner deviating from that brand look and feel. And so we required having a voice in all of those things. And one thing that I will say JMH was just outstanding in is working with all of the various departments here at LTU to make sure that things are virtually indistinguishable between what's developed by our own marketing people and the JMH marketing people. But I would also say that having a voice is important for the success of the whole venture. Any partner that you might consider will probably have expertise in marketing and developing an ad campaign and a marketing campaign and developing very slick, polished marketing materials. But it's your faculty and your program leads. They know the students. They know where the students are coming from. They know the undergraduate programs or the terms and the professional associations that will resonate with the target audience that you are actually seeking. If your marketing partner doesn't get that input from the academic programs, it's going to impact the success of the partnership. So it benefits both partners to have that voice and to have that voice carefully considered and listened to in moving forward.
And then with the enrollment process, I think it's worth asking who is following up and how is that being done? How aggressive is the follow-up? How quickly is it happening? These are all great questions. I would be asking, because I shamelessly secret shop my competitors to hear if they're doing anything different or better. I haven't found that yet, but I still ask. But what's the quality of someone who is talking with your potential students? Is this someone who's just out of school? Are they asking thoughtful questions? Is this a first job, or is this someone who's more experienced? And what's the turnover with the team members? And because that is something that I have heard from other university partners, that with prior engagements, there was a lot of turnover. And that matters because effective enrollment, it can take 6 weeks, it can take 8 weeks as people pull together their transcripts and their reference letters and that kind of thing. And developing a relationship with the person who is going through that process matters. The last thing before that, aligning with the questions that we're asking before we get into the end of the contract, is retention. Getting the right students into the program is important. And I talk about the right students because if you have somebody who's not a good fit, it's always going to impact the culture of the class. If they're not able to keep up with the work because they haven't had that experience, or they haven't had the depth of input from a program, that matters. That impacts the way the level of conversation that students are having with one another. And you also don't want to bring in somebody who is not going to succeed. That impacts the brand and your ability to talk about successfully getting people through the program. So asking the questions about what is the kind of retention that you're doing, what level of success have you had, and what's a reasonable expectation for attrition. Because although we want to keep 100% of the students, these are adults and things happen, so you may have some attrition, but you want to make sure that it's a reasonable rate. On the end of the contract, Lynn, I'll let you talk about this first.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's hard to know what you don't know sometimes. But do as much forecasting and doing the what if conversations with your colleagues as you can. We had what we thought was a pretty good contract with our first partner, but even in spite of that pretty good contract, there were still things came up at the end. So I will give you just a for example. In the contract, it was very clear that the partner was going to develop landing pages for the online degrees. So, and that at the end of the contract, the files used to create those landing pages would come back to us as a university, which was fine. But there were also Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, LinkedIn accounts used to help try and place ads and reach potential students. Getting the ownership of those accounts transferred back to the university is something that was a little ambiguous in the contract. So if you have a Twitter account, an LTU Online Degrees that has 2,000 followers, you want to make sure that you maintain control of that Twitter account and that you can continue to follow up with those students and engage those students. So trying to forecast to the degree that you can, as Nicole said, what social media platforms might be developed during the duration of the partnership, and articulating that at the end of the contract those become they get transferred back to the university, usernames, passwords, so that we can take over that account. That's all very important.
And there are partnerships, we work this way with our non-credit certificate programs that we help to launch, where you might have responsibilities that shift over time so that the transition is smoother. That's something to look at. Or you might say, well, we want to have a high-level plan included in the contract of what's going to, of how we're going to take over anything if we're ending instead of renewing the contract. Those are all things to be talking about. And talk about at the end of the contract, what are the hurdles? If you are partnering with a software firm who's offering services, will it be difficult to extricate yourself from that contract because of the software? Those are all good things to be asking in advance. So to kind of summarize, the alignment with the top 5 vendor requirements that we recommend that you have is make sure that that vendor has the capability to understand the program. You're not going to have somebody who's going to be an expert on any adult degree program, but they should have a process by which they gain an understanding. I would absolutely look for someone with experience marketing adult degree programs because, as I said, marketing and enrollment management for adult degrees is different than it is for the kids. Make sure that it's the right fit, that your goals are in alignment, and talk about the goals and what's reasonable and what's the culture and how frequently are you going to be talking with people. My big soapbox is transparency. I think all universities and colleges should demand complete transparency. Know how much money is being spent on your behalf. Know how well the vendor is doing in the way in which they're marketing the program. Are you seeing Facebook ads? Are you having a low cost per conversion but a high number of conversions? These are great things to be asking and to know ahead of time. And the ability for that vendor to fit in from a cultural perspective. And then when things go south, and I can start this off, and Lynn, I'd love to have you jump in with this. But Lynn talked about earlier at the end of the contract kind of asking the questions of what do you need to know before you get started? And I think knowing what poor performance looks like, because you should be knowing the goals in advance, helps to manage when things go south. You can then say, this is where we expected to be at this point, so this is what poor performance looks like. Because I think there's some back and forth when things begin to not perform well, or if they're not able to get off the ground, around whose fault is that. Lynn, do you want to chime in on that point?
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying of the importance of transparency. If the university or college is getting regular updates on what's being done, what ads are being placed, where they're being placed, what leads are coming in, what's the cost for those leads, you can have conversations all the way through, so that if things aren't going the way you want, you kind of anticipate it. You know what's happening. You can intervene earlier, and it becomes more of a proactive problem-solving partnership than a blaming partnership. if you don't get that data, if things aren't transparent and you're not seeing how things evolve over time, then a semester or two down the road, you're having a conversation about how come my enrollment isn't what I thought it was going to be, and things are kind of more in crisis mode. That I can't say enough for articulating what the expectations are for getting that data, knowing what's happening, and being informed so that you avoid those conversations altogether.
And I would say also knowing what are your obligations, you being the university or college versus the vendor's obligations. If you can map out who does what at each place, I think doing that at the beginning can also map out if things start to, if the wheels begin to come off, you'll have a better sense of whose responsibility it is to correct that. And I also think having a reasonable time frame for how long things may take to correct. And depending on the program would help articulate that time frame, the kind of program it is. I will say, wearing my vendor cap, that something that I hope that universities will think about, because things don't always go perfectly smoothly. There will be mistakes, there will be bumps in the road. I think that's particularly true for the beginning of an engagement. But having an understanding and being able to identify, is this a bump in the road, or is this a cultural problem, or is this a systematic problem? I think that's the kind of questioning you need to have when things begin to go wrong. Lynn, do you want to say anything else on this topic?
No, I think that's good. It all boils back to me about spending time when you selected a vendor of having a conversation about what those expectations are. As long as you are both very clear on those expectations, that will prevent major bad feelings if things do start to go wrong.
Great. Well, that is all for our webinar. I'll pause for a moment and ask if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. If you do, you can type in your questions into the box under questions, and I'm happy to take a moment and answer them. Okay, Lynn, this one looks like it's one for you. Have you ever secret shopped your partner? Do you feel like that's something that you would recommend?
I personally have not. We have had people within our organization that have. Not with you guys, though. I do have to say it was with our previous partner to see how assertively our students were being recruited. That was an issue for our enrollment services department. So we did want to follow up on some complaints that we got from students. So we did secret shop them. Maybe I have to secret shop you guys.
I wouldn't say no to that. Here's another one. Lynn, do you have challenges giving vendors access to internal systems? This is one that I hear frequently. So I'll let you answer that, and I can tag on to it.
We have very stringent requirements and processes, and both our previous partner and JMH complied with our requirements because they needed access to our enrollment systems, our registration systems, our learning management system. So yes, we are fairly, I would say, on the scale of 1 to 10 as far as security lockdown precautions. I would put us at like a 9.5. But yes, we have procedures in place and forms in place and hoops that people have to jump through. But as long as the partners are willing to hold to our security systems and our FERPA systems, it's not a problem to generally work through those and give the needed access. And I would suggest that you do that, because if not, it just adds so much more work to your daily tasks to have to be the go-between.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's completely true. And I would say that I've experienced both. I've experienced having more access to internal systems, which is a lot simpler and also makes us a lot less of a burden on the university, where we can just go to the university when there's any challenges versus kind of a check-in. I have other vendors who send regular reports so that we have a sense for how things are going on. But I will say the reports are helpful and wonderful, but we prefer just being able to look up things more on demand and in real time. All right, final question. I've got Nicole, what do you look for in a partner? And that's a great question. I would, and that's one that I think universities and colleges should be asking their vendors. For us, that collaborative spirit makes all the difference in the world. I would ask my university partners to make sure that they get all of the stakeholders involved prior to launching a partnership, because I've seen it go both ways, and it's a lot more challenging for everyone involved if you don't have buy-in from all of the stakeholders. And those are probably my top ones. And because we act as an internal consultant, I think for us, some importance is in the launch phase being accessible as we get things up and running. Okay, I think that's it. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your perspective in partnerships. And everyone, thank you for joining us. I will be sending a recording of this webinar as a follow-up, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. Bye-bye.